You went to the doctor and you said you're tired all the time. You can't focus, your drive, professionally, sexually, whatever, is just gone. You're working harder than ever and recovering worse than ever. And they ran your blood work. Your doctor told you your testosterone is normal. Now, you thought, okay, great. Why do I feel like absolute garbage still then? And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never look at a lab report the same way again. If you don't know me, my name is Al-Najaar, and I'm a medical doctor specializing in men's hormonal health. And I work with high-performing men, entrepreneurs, executives, business owners, who all go to their doctor and they tell them their labs are fine, but they still feel like they're running on 40% capacity. Now, I'm going to say something that might annoy some of my colleagues, so let me be precise about it. Your doctor is not wrong. They're simply solving a completely different problem than the one that you have. This distinction is everything, and that's exactly what this video is about. We're going to cover 4 things. If we have a look at the iPad, we're going to talk about why the normal range isn't what you think it is. We're going to look at what the difference is between total testosterone and free testosterone and why that distinction is so important to make. We're going to look at how symptoms work on a scale of levels. It's not simply a hard cutoff. And then in the end, I'm going to give you 3 specific questions you can ask your own doctor to move forward. And by the end of this, you'll have a completely different mental model in terms of how to read your lab work. Let's get into it. Let me start with a question. If your CFO or whoever is managing the business's economy comes into a meeting and says, revenue is well within normal range, you'd sit there and ask, what do you mean? Would you be satisfied? Of course not. Because is it the normal range of the industry average, the top performers in your industry, or would it just be the average or well within the normal range of every single business out there, even the ones that went bankrupt last year? That context changes everything. Here's how the normal range of testosterone is built. Researchers take 1,000 samples from men in the general population and they measure their testosterone levels, right? So they take 1,000 men and measure their total T levels. That wasn't that nice. Let's do that again. Total T. And what they do then is they calculate a reference interval, which is usually the middle 95% of all values. Okay? So have to remember that 95% of middle values. And so if you're above that or if you're below that, the 95% of all middle values, you are out of the normal range. That is the definition. But let me tell you why that is even an issue. Because the general population is obviously the general population. So you have different types of men. You have someone who is sedentary. This guy, he just sits on his couch. Then you have someone who is on multiple medications, right? Overweight, probably on heart medication, cholesterol lowering medication, whatever, all these chronic lifestyle issues. Then you have, oh, the guy lost his head. Then you have very, very few men in the general population who are actually in shape. But again, these are very few. And so this is the general problem or challenge you have to face, you have to think about when you look at your blood work, because you are simply just measuring the testosterone levels of all men in the general population. And so the issue is most men in the general population are either sedentary or on multiple medications. And so the reference range, the RR reference range, is the average of a sick population. That's the main issue when you look at the reference range, because men in the West are spiraling down in terms of their metabolic health. You have a bunch of men who have undiagnosed metabolic disease. They have prediabetes. They probably have heart disease, and their doctor doesn't know yet because they don't come to the checkups, right? So the reference range is the average of a sick population in the West. So when your doctor says you are simply normal, what he's saying is you are not at the bottom of a population that includes a lot of very unhealthy people. Unfortunately, that's a very low bar to set. So let me make this concrete, right? The reference range usually is somewhere between 300 to 1,000 nanograms per deciliter. You could be 310 or you could be 950, and both of these would be considered normal. Now, how many men would drive a car that is only 30% of its total capacity? Very few, right? And this is what could be said about men who are at 30% of their total testosterone capacity. Not only do you want to know why you're only running at 30% capacity, you want to know what's dragging you down. Even with standard lab work, that's very hard to figure out. What's even worse, though, is the reference range as we know it is actually on a decline. The number your father called normal back in the 80s is completely different to what is called normal now. And that has massive implications in terms of how to interpret your results. Now, let's talk about the population drift, because this is incredibly important so you know how to read your own blood work. Because every single man, well, we can usually say that generally for the population, testosterone levels, total testosterone levels, has declined by 1% per year since the 1980s. Okay? Per year. Let me make it 1% per year since, there we go, since the 80s. That means the average man today has significantly lower testosterone than 40 years ago. Think about what that means. The reference range used to establish normal is built from a population that is already trending downward. So every decade, that bar is set lower and lower. And we call it normal because statistically, it is normal. This is not a conspiracy theory. The mechanisms are well understood. We have a sedentary lifestyle, right? That's one of the issues. Sedentary lifestyle. We also have disrupted sleep. If you don't sleep properly, how are you going to even recover and build muscle or burn fat? That is a major driver of your testosterone levels. Then we have processed foods. We have endocrine disruptors, endocrine disrupting chemicals, EDCs, toxins, plastics, chemicals that weren't in the environment just 40 years ago, now influencing both your testosterone levels and your fertility markers in general. And then you can add chronic stress, and probably even worse, right? Obesity rates. These factors overall are crushing your testosterone levels. So this can be one of the reasons for why the reference range for total testosterone levels are declining, and they would still tell you you're well within the normal range, even though 40 years ago you would be out of range, or at least higher likelihood of being out of range. Now here's the question this raises, because if normal just means the average of the current population that we know is sedentary, doesn't sleep, eat processed foods, is stressed, and is obese, do you want to be part of that? Is normal actually good enough? And for most of the men that I work with, the answer is clearly no. They didn't come to me because they want to be average. They came because they used to perform at a level that normal doesn't explain anymore. But even if we did fix the reference range, there would be another issue hiding in plain sight. And this one almost never gets addressed by your GP appointments. Now, let's talk about this. Total testosterone versus free testosterone. Because when your GP orders a panel, he almost always orders one thing, and that is total testosterone. But the issue is total testosterone measures literally all the testosterone in your blood, both the one that is running freely in your bloodstream, but also the testosterone that is bound by SHBG. But here's the critical issue. Your body can only use the free testosterone. It cannot use the rest, the testosterone that's bound to whatever protein, SHBG or albumin. So you can have total testosterone at, let's say, 650, which looks solid, but then you can have a bigger amount of it being bound to SHBG, which is sex hormone binding globulin, which then crashes your free testosterone. So think about it this way. You have, let's say, you have 10 salespeople, right? 7 of them are in the training room. So you really only have 3 salespeople who are actually making decisions, making calls, talking to customers. This is the significance. This is the difference between having total testosterone versus free testosterone. It's only the 3 salespeople that are actually putting in work. And so you could say that 10 salespeople is the total team, right? But the 3 salespeople are the ones who are doing or driving sales or doing work. This is the main difference. So most GPs don't even test SHBG or test free testosterone. I've seen men walk into the clinic with total testosterone of 700, fine by standard criteria, but free testosterone is in the bottom quartile. They've been told they're normal. Meanwhile, they're exhausted, they can't focus, their drive is more or less gone, both professionally, what they have to do at work, but also sexually at home with their wives, and they don't understand why their mood is flat. When we look at the full picture, total testosterone, free testosterone, and SHBG, the story is completely different. Now, SHBG can be elevated for a multiple of reasons. Low thyroid, high thyroid, a lot of medications. It can be different things. Chronic stress, most importantly, for high-performing men, it's that chronic stress aspect, which leads to the third part of the picture that almost never gets discussed. Because there's a third hormone I haven't mentioned yet, and for my patients specifically, the high-performance executives, business owners, this one might be the most important one of all of them. Here's something that doesn't get that much airtime in mainstream media. You have two main axes competing basically against each other. It's the HPA axis and the HPG axis. So it's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal gland axis, which controls cortisol. Let's try this again. There we go. Cortisol, which is also known as your stress hormone. Then we have the HPG axis, the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, which controls testosterone, fertility markers in general for us as men. And the thing between these two is they are interconnected. When one is up, the other one is usually suppressed. Think about it like this. If you are being chased by a predator, the last thing your body is thinking about is fertility. You just need to get away from it. And this is what happens with some of the guys who are chronically stressed because they've just been running on fumes for 3 years, running their business. They're chronically stressed. And what does that mean? That means that their hypothalamus, the first part here of the axis, suppresses the rest of this axis because its full focus is on running this. It want to run the HPA axis to increase cortisol. Not because it wants to, but because the body is in a constant stressful environment. And so you could say actually that sustained high performance, I'm just going to abbreviate it, equals chronic, I'm going to abbreviate that as well, chronic, there we go, chronic stress signal. You are simply paying a tax on your drive and your ambition. And if you come in to the clinic and do blood work, this might look normal, right? But the truth is it has been down-regulated due to the sustained high performance and the chronic stress afterwards. And so this is actually what makes everything worse because you have the cortisol that then suppresses the testosterone production. When you have a low T, this is where you have the symptoms. This is where you get the low drive, the low motivation, low energy, no ability to focus, concentrate. These issues, your libido completely gone. You can't get erections. Your wife starts to notice and she's like, what's happened? What's going on? And you simply just try to push through it. But then this is what happens because you try to push through it with your sustained high performance, which then increases the chronic stress signal even more and then decreases the testosterone production even further. So when you think you're doing something good by pushing through, drinking more coffee, you are actually making everything worse in the end. So most men actually don't even notice that they've been running on, let's say, 60% because this has happened gradually. This doesn't happen from one day to another. And the sad part is they usually forget what being at 100% even feels like. Okay. So we know the normal range is built on, let's say, a compromised population. We know total testosterone alone is not worth, it's not the complete picture, right? We know high performers are specifically vulnerable to cortisol-driven suppression due to what we just talked about here. So what do? Which questions do you ask your GP? Now, let's get to it. This is the practical section of this video, because I'm going to give you the 3 questions. Before I do that, I want to be very, very specific and very clear. Your doctor here is not the enemy. Your doctor knows how to treat disease. You are going in there with a different problem because you're not necessarily sick. You want to optimize. And that's not what he is there for. That's not what the system is there for. So just have that in mind when you enter your doctor's office. He is not your enemy. You want to optimize your performance? That's fine. But that's not his mandate. So you would require different tools. But you can walk in there, you can ask for some of these tests, and use it as an expansion of the conversation instead of challenging him, because you want to be a bit more specific than they're used to answering. Here are the 3 questions. The first one is free testosterone. What is my free testosterone? Can we test it and not just the total? Because this is the number, like we discussed, that tells you what your body is actually capable of using. What gets to the brain, what gets to the heart, what gets to the muscles, and not simply your total testosterone, but the active fraction of your total testosterone that your body is capable of using. The second one is SHBG. Ask him, can we check my SHBG? The sex hormone binding globulin. This again tells you how much of your total testosterone is bound. Because if your SHBG is high, that means your free testosterone is going to be low. Question 3. LH, FSH. You want to know if there is an issue, whether that issue is from the brain or from your testicles. Knowing what your free testosterone levels are is good. Then you know what your active testosterone capacity is in your body, how much your SHBG is, how much is actually bound up. Testing LH and FSH tells you exactly if you have a pituitary issue or if you have a testicular issue, because the treatment for them are 2 different things. Because if LH is low and testosterone is low, you know by then that the issue is upstream, it's up here. But if your LH is actually high and your testosterone is low, you know that it's more of a testicular issue. And so if you don't test LH or FSH, you're never going to know really what to do, because like I said before, it takes 2 different solutions. You don't know if it's up here the issue is or if it's a testicular issue. Imagine it's like an engine. If the engine is not working, you need to understand why. Does it not have fuel? Is it the ignition? Is it something mechanical? You have to be able to troubleshoot it, and this is how you do that. So you can write these down and bring them to your next consultation. And again, I really want to make sure that you understand this is not to challenge your doctor. He's not the enemy, but this is just to be able to take the conversation a notch up. Now, let's bring all of this together. I think if we go back to the first slide here. Now you know that the normal range is built from a population sample that includes a lot of very unhealthy, sedentary men on a lot of medication, right? Normal is a statistical average. It's not a performance benchmark. Second, you know that the average testosterone, total testosterone, has declined for the past 40 years, which means today's normal is different from what normal was 40 years ago. 3, you now know what the difference is between I think it said hidden layer. There we go. Good. Now you know what the difference is between total testosterone and free testosterone. You could be sitting on a pile of total testosterone, but you wouldn't know how much is actually available for your body to use if you don't know what your free testosterone level is. Also, symptoms run on a scale. It's not a hard cutoff. You can be in range and still have some of the issues that would be classified as being low testosterone. And so I want you to remember that the gap between where you are and where you could be exactly the explanation for why you're feeling whatever you're feeling. And 5, your doctor isn't wrong. I really want to make sure that you understand this. This is not to challenge your doctor. He's solving a different problem. He want to rule out disease. That's the right tool for that, just looking at total testosterone. But if your question is, why am I underperforming despite being technically healthy, that's a different question and it needs different tools. And so here's the question I want you to leave with. If we go back to the CFO, if he walked in and he said, revenue is normal, just like it's within the normal range, that also contains all the companies that went bankrupt last year, you wouldn't accept that. You'd want to know how you're performing against your competitors, against the best companies, and not simply the worst companies or just a general sample of all of the companies. And your blood work deserves the same standard. Normal is not a goal. Optimal is a goal. But if you want to be normal, that's fine. That's not what we talk about on this channel. We try to look for how you can optimize your performance in every single way. And the gap is simply measurable and addressable between what normal is and what optimal is. Every single man out there can get to optimal. For a lot of men that I've worked with over the years, this is what explains the years of quietly underperforming, what they could do just say 10, 20 years ago. Some men explain that now in their 50s, they cannot do all the things they used to do in their early 40s. And this could be some of the explanation behind it. There's no reason to just chalk it up and say, this must be what feeling older or getting older feels like. No. You don't have to accept that. So if you want to know where your hormones are holding you back specifically, I have created a quiz. It includes some of the questions that I ask my patients. You can take it. There's a link for it down in the description below. It's completely free, and it's going to tell you what you can do, what your gaps are, and how to improve on it. After you finish the quiz, you get the opportunity to either book a call with me or one from my team if you want to get some help in terms of implementing some of the changes that we suggest. It's usually for men who have more money than they have time. So you can still take the quiz. It's completely free. If you don't, that's also fine. One last thing I want to say is if you enjoyed this video and it gave you something, it gave you whatever, it helped you understand testosterone a little bit more, it helped you understand why we look at the things the way we do, please share it with one other guy. This is still a very new channel, so I would appreciate every single like, every single comment. If you subscribe to the channel, that would mean a lot to me as well. It would also show me that this is actually something that people want to hear more about, and I would know that I should create more content. So if you enjoyed this one, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.